Deirra Footman is a senior network engineer, Cisco champion blogger and podcaster operating at the intersection of technology and content creation. In this conversation, we discuss the merits of vocational education, common hurdles of starting a career in tech, the impact that social media has on educational pursuits, and strategies for how to approach continued learning.
Welcome to the Cloud Gambit. How are you doing this morning?
Good. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Doing well, and thank you for jumping in on the weekend.
Yeah.
Yeah. You could be sleeping, but you're talking about technology. So yeah, awesome to have you here. You're based in the DMV, right?
Yep.
Or
I'm
around
in
there?
Baltimore.
Okay. So yeah, not to be confused with the Department of Motor Vehicles,
No.
of course, but I'm sure that happens
Everyone's
from time to
favorite
time.
place to go.
Yeah. Is that, so I'm kind of confused about that. Is that just DC Metro and like surrounding areas, or is it like all of DC, all of Maryland, all of Virginia?
So technically it's the DC metro area. So wherever you can think about wherever the metro goes, that is considered the DMV.
Okay.
Air quotes. Baltimore's about an hour away from DC. We have, I kind of talked about this on Twitter, but we have like two different cultures. But explaining this to people who are not from the area can get a little hairy, and they just look at you like, oh, but Baltimore's in Maryland, so it's the DMV. And you're just like, okay, cool.
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah. Well, I mean, first off, congrats on starting up the Thrive in Tech podcast. As I was just telling you before we started the show, I was doing research and I was like listening to a little bit of it, and then I just like listened to all of it. It was fantastic. I couldn't stop.
Thank you. I'm so happy to hear that. I kind of sat on it for a bit because I wasn't sure. We have so many technology podcasts. They're just a plethora for anything you want to discuss. So I kind of hesitated about it, but I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go ahead, put it out. And so far the reception's been really good. So I'm happy.
Yeah. I mean, I've been in tech for a long time, and I sort of started off my content creation journey a few years ago. Like I do content for like LinkedIn Learning and a few other things, but you're like, I would say that I'm not like someone just coming into the industry, but I'm also not like a complete industry veteran either. I'm kind of like in the middle somewhere maybe. But your recent one with JB John was like so good for me. The whole bit about like that, like what type of content gets views versus what content is actually valuable, and what you can learn from. That whole bit was absolutely fantastic, and I really appreciated like both of you took like a concerted effort to like explain the problem and just sort of like break down each individual step, and kind of like all these things are things that folks like me are thinking about, pressures that a lot of us have. So yeah, it was just really good. For those listening in, take a listen.
Thank you. Yeah, that was one of the reasons I kind of paused content creation for a while, because I was just like, I don't know. I started out just like, I want to document my journey. I want to meet people. I want to ask these questions for stuff that, problems I'm having at work that, from a technical aspect. And, it just kind of grows and grows. And before you know it, you're doing this thing that started out as just like for fun. And now it's like, oh, well, you need to monetize it. You have this big audience. And then you start kind of seeing like what content does well. And you sort of have to step back and ask yourself, am I going to lean more into this like lifestyle type stuff, which really isn't me? I'm a little bit more private about like just lifestyle stuff. Or am I just going to accept that I'm putting in all this effort and maybe it's just not going to be monetized because the views aren't there? And then finding some sort of like middle ground, which I think I have now. So I think I got a little bit of I don't like to call it fluff content, but some technical people might, like all of the career stuff, because I think those things are very important and we don't spend a lot of time talking about them until we hit a wall in our career. And then we're like, hey, uh, how do I like sell myself beyond these technical skills? How do I lead people? Like, we don't talk about that until we're facing it. So I think I found a balance between that with the podcast and then still doing my technical stuff on the blog. So I think
Yeah.
I'm at a
Well,
happy medium now.
the way that you talk, the way that you sort of engage in this conversation, though, is like really valuable. It's like real life. It's not the short clickbait style, like, oh, if you follow X, Y, and Z, you're going to make, this much money in this amount of time. It's actually really good advice. And I think what you just said was, I think you actually wrote about that, like the where have I been blog or something. I can't remember which
Mm-hmm.
one it was, but you're like, hey, I hit the brakes. You chose to step back rather than conform to like all this popular trendy stuff on, the TikToks of the world, especially since at the time, I think content creation to you was, again, like you said, was starting to feel like insincere and such. And I think um, you said something that almost sounded poetic. It was like you're saying it driven more by like algorithmic demands than like authenticity, or
Yeah.
something like that. I thought that was really cool. And it's really smart, to understand and acknowledge that, and to understand sometimes. I think we've all been there, and we all have to, at some point, we have a lot of stuff going on. We got family stuff, we got personal stuff, and this stuff, the content creation can almost be like a hobby, and at least at the beginning. And sometimes you just have to hit the brakes for yourself. And yeah, it's really smart to acknowledge like when it is that you have to do that.
Yeah, so many people like just DM'd me on the side after I posted that. Like I was feeling the same way, but I just kept like putting stuff out because I didn't want to lose traction. And I'm just like, if you built this audience, they should be, with you. If you say, hey, I need to take a break. I think I didn't talk to him, but one great example I can think of is Dewan Lightfoot, Lab Every Day. He took a step back to like focus on like just career stuff. And when he started creating content again, everyone was still there. And if you weren't there, then, maybe you're not really a fan, or you don't really appreciate what that person has to offer. So I think taking a break
He's
is when you're unsure is good.
Yeah, he's so cool. I got to meet him at reInvent a few years ago. We got to have a few conversations, and he's like someone that did that whole grassroots thing at the beginning, just really, started off small and just grew, but he like never lost his authenticity throughout the whole process, like
Yeah.
some do. Just very sincere. Awesome person.
Yeah. I love
Great
Dewan.
example out there. One thing I noticed about your podcast, obviously, just having listened to a lot of it this last week, is you come in well prepared. I can tell you're well prepared, but the framing of your questions, I feel like you can tell, like when interview style stuff, if the person asking the questions is asking from like a practical level of some experience over the years, and I can
Mhm.
tell. Like, okay, like you've been there, obviously. And so why, like when you look back and you talked about pivoting, into the podcast stuff, why did you, if you could, sort of describe why you decided to start the podcast?
Sure.
Like what does it mean to you? And like, where do you kind of see it going?
Sure. So I had always wanted to start a podcast. I just didn't really know what to talk about, to be honest. Again, there are like hundreds of tech podcasts, from like just nitty gritty technical stuff to more career focused stuff to more interview style stuff. So I always had it on my like list of things when one day I want to start a podcast. But I'm not a person who likes to just do a thing if I don't see the inherent value. Um, and I always think about myself when I was just starting out in tech and all the questions I had and the kind of walls I hit. So if I can't create something that helps that person, then I'm like, let me just, pause and think about it. So during the pandemic, we were all just chronically online because there was just nothing else to do for the most part.
Locked in our
Um,
houses all the time. Yeah.
and during that time, Clubhouse happened and Twitter Spaces happened, and I really, really enjoyed those two platforms and just the conversations that were being had. Of course, Clubhouse, everyone migrated to Twitter because that's where a lot of our audiences are. So the Twitter spaces were just really good. We were having just a lot of great conversations beyond the technical aspect of things. And of course, there was that bubble of people who were just like, how to get into tech. But I was really focused on that, like the conversations that were more geared towards the mid-level people. So maybe you've had one or two tech jobs. You're kind of like, all right, let me start doing a little bit more career planning. Do I want to do leadership? Do I want to stay technical? What about office politics? All of those kind of conversations. And I was seeing that just in observing, I participated in some of these spaces, but in also just observing the conversation around it. There were a lot of people who had gotten into tech right before the pandemic, who there was just a real need for people to understand how to navigate their career beyond, oh, go get this cert, go get that cert, do labs, like all of that stuff. And I think we spend a lot of time in tech focused on the technical aspect, and we don't kind of develop as well-rounded engineers and architects and analysts because, that's only one part of your job. You got to email people, so that's communication. You got to lead meetings, that's also communication. Navigating just like the political aspect of it, knowing how to, manage up, if you will. And so I was seeing the conversations online from people. Also the feedback on Twitter Spaces, just how we kind of got into a cycle of we were talking about the same things over and over again. And so that was at the point where I decided to like take a step back because there's only so many times I can tell you how I got into tech. There's only so many times I can tell you how I pivoted from this thing to this thing. And I felt like I had done enough spaces, enough podcasts where these questions have been answered. So I'm like, let me just kind of take a step back. But once the Twitter spaces died down, I was still seeing these questions. I was getting DMs about, well, I have this weird situation at work. I don't really know how to navigate it. What would you do? Were you in a similar situation? So at that point, I decided, okay, I think I have the podcast now. And I really wanted I titled it Thrive in Tech because yes, you have the technical aspect, but you also have all of these soft skills, the mental health aspect, the financial management. A lot of us, I know for me, I came from a low income background. So suddenly going from this low income background, or maybe you were making minimum wage to you're making six figures is like a big jump. And some people, they go out, they splurge, and then they wake up one day like, oh crap, I need to rein all of this in. So I wanted the podcast to be conversations beyond just the technical piece. I want you to focus on your career stuff, content creation, like John and I talked about, and then mental health, financial, knowing when to leave a job. Like that's a big thing. All of those things that I feel like are these kind of like backroom conversations that you might have amongst peers, or, maybe you got a coworker you're close with and you're like, hey, like that was weird. What do you think about this? And I want to just put all of that like on the forefront. So
Really, yeah, I love all that. That's great. Like just stuff that, folks need to hear, but almost they don't know that they need to hear it with like where they're at. It makes a lot of difference, and by the way, like I thought it was cool. Like we actually have a shared experience. So like yourself, I went through the Cisco Networking Academy when I was in high school, which was awesome.
yes.
And I got selected for an internship at a local ISP as well. And it was a great way to kick my career off. I also had an opportunity to work with like a local, someone locally that did consulting for like small businesses. And it just was like the timing was so good. And how did the Cisco Network Academy and like the subsequent internship just sort of impact you, like your curiosity, your career, like, and open up opportunities for you?
Yeah, I owe everything to the Cisco Networking Academy, definitely. I kind of, so my internship ended up turning into my first job. I was brought on as a contractor and then eventually hired full time. But because of, it was at the local school district here in Baltimore, Baltimore City Schools. And we had a very small team, but, a lot of needs. We managed about 200 buildings, 180-ish schools were in those buildings. Um, so it was a large network to work on as your first network. Like, that's amazing. We had well over 2,000 switches, a lot of unique problems. I got to see, I got exposure to everything. So route switch, a little bit of wireless, voice, data center, where, a lot of jobs are, you're very like siloed into one thing. You're the network person, so you just touch the network stuff. Um, and I got to touch a little bit of everything. So one, I think that opportunity gave me the chance to kind of explore things. I didn't really get to do as much security, and I've always kind of had an interest in security, but security is like that chicken and the egg situation. You need the experience to get the job. You need a job to get the experience.
Yeah.
So, but I did get to touch everything under the networking umbrella. So it gave me an opportunity to explore and kind of figure out what I liked. And I kind of bounced around from things after that before I kind of landed in the data center sweet spot. Now I'm getting to do a little bit more security because those two are kind of adjacent. So
That is really cool. I went through the academy at a vocational school that, like, I was in high
mhm.
school, and basically juniors and seniors, could take advantage of it. So the juniors would go like the first half of the day, and the seniors would go the second half of the day. Was your program kind of like that? Was it like part of your high school, or was there like a separate vocational or trade school involved?
So it was part of our high school. My high school was a vocational school. So they offered Cisco, cosmetology, anything you could think of in a vocational school, they had something like that.
That's so
Um,
cool.
our program started in the 10th grade. So the 10th grade was really just focused on like A plus material. What is a computer? Building a computer, all the components. And then junior year and senior year was like, well, junior year would have been like equivalent to IC and D1, if you remember when the CCNA was split into two. And then senior year would be like the CCNA material. And the second semester of senior year was when we did our internship. So we would go every day for 90 minutes to, learn this material. And then we got to do an internship. So it was great.
I think that's
Highly
such a
recommended path.
yeah. There should be more investment in that type of education. It just kills me thinking about it sometimes, because so many young people, I talk to so many young people, and they just go, it's like, okay, I'm going to go to college because I have to. I don't even know what I want to do. Like, should I do this
Mhm.
or should I do that? And these trades give you the ability to, okay, do you want to go in? Do you want to learn a trade, and do you want to start making some money? And then you can, think about, like, okay, maybe you get a job that's going to pay for your school completely. And then you can like
Yeah.
focus on, something additional once you go to college. But it doesn't like set you dormant where you're just sitting there wondering what you're going to do, and you're just going to college because you have to. Like, you want to make decisions based on some reason. Like, okay, I'm going to college to accomplish X, Y, and Z. That's why I'm going. And yeah,
Right.
you just don't want to get stuck in limbo. And I think these trade schools are amazing um, for
Yeah,
that.
they drilled that into us. We also had like at that time we just had like AP classes. And now they've expanded it to do like early college, and so you can graduate with your associates on top of having this trade. So they've like really done a great job of growing the program out. But at that time, we just kind of had like AP classes, and there was just this focus of, you get the best of both worlds. Ideally, you'd use your trade skills to go and get a job to pay for school, or to just, make sure you can, supplement your living while you're in school. But yeah,
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of vocational schools. I will scream about them from the rafters, like find one and go.
Same here. That's a big recommendation I give to so many people. And it's so funny because I've kept in contact with some of my friends in high school. And like, I had a really close friend that did diesel mechanics. and he's a really successful in diesel mechanics today. He like leads teams and stuff. And then I had another, someone that sat next to me in actually most of my classes. She was a technical guru. She was like an artist pretty much, but she went into graphic design. Well, guess what? She has a really amazing career in graphic design today. And we were all together, all at the same time, all at this trade school. And we found what we loved and we just, ran with it. And that's just such a good thing, finding out. Sometimes you don't know that you love something so much until you try it and you dig in a little bit deeper. And it's just such a good opportunity.
And being able to do that while you're, I was just going to say, and being able to do that while you're in school, top tier, because you have the time.
I know. It's amazing. I mean, yeah, you have more time than you're ever going to have at that point before you, it's just, a lot of positives there. So in the world we live in today, how do I phrase this? So anyone can post anything on any platform, at any time. So I personally think that the stuff that usually goes viral seems to be the massively clickbait stuff, and the good stuff seems to really not get, peddled by the algorithm. So if you see a following that's huge with really awesome content, like say, Dewan's, all the stuff Dewan's done over the years, he built that following without, I'm sure he's had help from the algorithm at times, but he did it grassroots all the way from the beginning and just grew. So, and part of that too, I think, is like the popularity and the boosting of, like, the algorithm is like rewarding short form content, like this less than a minute pieces of things. Do you think at some point this reverses and the good stuff starts getting rewarded again, or there's a spotlight on quality again, or are we just doomed to just have everything going into this social media and YouTube machine? And good luck finding anything.
I think we're at that point now, actually. And I was talking about this with someone else who does content creation, and they do more lifestyle content. But particularly, it initially started with a conversation about Instagram and how people are now, they want more organic content. I think even in the tech space, everything became this super curated. You have this really big, this really nice setup, all the lights, the gaming shit, all the cutesy stuff, and the MacBook and everything like that. And I think we're starting to see like a push from audiences for more authentic, organic content. Like, I don't want 10 ways to break into cybersecurity in 45 days. I don't want that. I want to know, actual step by step. Let's talk about the material in the book. Let's talk about, how you overcame this lab. So I think we're seeing we're shifting back to that more in-depth conversation. And I think people who are really good content creators who have been waiting for this, and they've been trying to like figure out, how do I get the most value like out of a minute? And they're kind of just, playing around with that, seeing what makes sense, and testing it out. One thing I've also noticed, there's been like an uptick in blogs. I've seen a lot of people saying that, either asking for a blog post, or, hey, did you, is there somewhere I can read more about this? Or just other creators saying that they've noticed like their blogs are like picking up traffic. So I think all of those are good things. I think also with AI coming into play, people are really looking for a way to validate, what they're reading. So building that trust with your audience is going to be very important. Like, I want to know that when I read this, that I can trust what you're saying. You've done the thing you said you do, and I've watched you over the years. So I think we're at like a very like an interesting intersection pivot point now.
I love that. You're like all glass half full with this, and I love it. That's great. I really hope that that's what happens, because even like with myself, like trying to figure out like being a content creator myself, like, you know, I'm on most of the social media platforms, but even like there's certain things I want to see, but I just get overloaded with all this other junk all the time. And it's really hard to sort of like, what do they call it? Like tailor or curate your feed with the stuff that like is important to you. That is so hard. It's a really hard thing to do. And yeah, I mean, I think YouTube sort of has an easier way to do this, because you can subscribe, and then you can, like, the way that they have the notifications set up, at least it was easier for me to set up, but yeah, it's just hard. And yeah, I hope that does get easier, but it's hard, you know, when everybody's throwing content up and there's so many things and the algorithm's trying to figure out what you like. Of course, you're going to get stuff that, yeah, you're going to have, there's going to be some, you know, a curating process with each of these, you know, platforms.
Definitely.
Of course. So yeah, you talked about writing. You started your blog back in 2016, and I love writing. Like in school, like I was never a big math person. I was always into writing and reading. I loved reading.
Same.
So that was my thing. And I think that's why, like, I started a blog a while back too, but I like to write. Like I do it more. I mean, maybe this sounds kind of selfish, but like I do it more for me to validate what it is I'm learning or what it is I've done. Because once you write something and you're putting pen to paper about something, you really find out if you know it as good as you thought that you did.
Yep.
You know, so it's a really good skill to have. But what I was going to ask is, do you like writing in general, or was it something you started doing and you liked it like more as you did it more over the years?
So similar to you, I was a big reading and writing. Just English overall was my top subject. So I've always loved writing. I wrote a lot of short stories. I did a lot of, you know, poetry and stuff in school. And then, you know, I kind of put it down, and, you know, once I started working and everything, and then I subscribed to like a lot of blogs. I think in the early, like the 2010 to like 2013 range was like really big for blogs. So I followed all sorts of blogs. And I was like, you know, it'd be really cool if I could do this with like what I'm working with. And at that time, I think tech was really focused on like forums and stuff. Twitter had kind of started, but it was mostly just like coding programmers and like InfoSec people. And I was like, where are the networking people? Those are the people I want to find. So I just started up my Twitter and started tweeting about networking. I found a few people, and then I just started writing about what I was doing at work. And at that time, I was working at Ericsson Living doing collaboration and voice stuff. And I had decided that wasn't for me anymore. I need to get back to networking. If you think it's bad when the network is down, when the phones are down, oh my God, it's no.
End of the world. End of the world. Yeah.
So I had decided, you know, I tried voice. I don't really like it that much. I want to get back to networking. So at that point, I was recertifying for my CCNA. I was like, this is great. I can write about the CCNA. I can write about what I'm doing at work. So that's what I started doing. And it kind of grew from there. And much to your point, yes, you will start writing about something that you think you know. And then you start writing and you're like, wait, I'm missing something here, or this doesn't make sense. And it kind of reinforces what you're learning. So I always think that's great. Whenever people ask me how to get started, I'm like, start by writing about what you're studying. And if you can, what you're doing at work, you will grow like you will see gaps in your knowledge that you did not know was there.
100%. Even if you're taking notes, I mean, I have like tons of notes over the years. Like I don't even know what to use for note taking anymore, but for better or for worse, I've used OneNote for like a really long time. My stuff's organized the way I want it to be organized, and it works. I've been trying to I do a lot of coding myself, and I do a lot of Markdown. So I've tried Obsidian as well, because it's the hot thing right now. And OneNote is just, it's got like the features and the flexibility for me, so it just works. But yeah, like I keep these private notes, and like I'll go through and like I'll be documenting something I'm working on, so I remember, and then be like, well, wait, what about this too? Oh, what about this too? And I start zooming out a little bit, and you see that full picture, and then you like, instead of like going and asking, oh, what should I learn about this topic or that topic? If you're working on something with that topic, or you're doing something small, you write about it, and then you find out really quick what you need to learn about it, because you're going to say, oh, that doesn't make sense. I've got to look at that, and the rabbit hole.
Something I've struggled with that, and I've heard other people bring this up, is going too far down the rabbit hole. So knowing like when to stop. Like I'm seeing people, and I think this has kind of gotten really big on Twitter, where I'll see people go to get like a whole cert in something, particularly like Linux. And I'm not saying the Linux cert is not, valuable. I don't want people to think that, but I'll see people say, oh, for the cloud, you need to learn Linux. And they'll just go get a bunch of Linux certs. And I'm like, you can just get the book and familiarize yourself with the operating system and the commands and, how it helps you do your job. So I think that's something I've struggled with, feeling like I need to be an expert in everything. I think in recent years, I've kind of come back.
Yeah, you're so spot on there. So like cloud computing and, dare I say, like artificial intelligence, like AIs, these are like breathing all the oxygen out of the room these days. Like there's no air left for anybody else. It's like the AI stuff, especially, like, as much as I'm a fan of certain applications of AI, it's like Web3 on steroids. It's just blown up to such a place that it's just like, it almost makes you sick. So whenever some of these new things hit and they become there's so much polarization, so much energy. Folks are so excited and they're like, oh, I want to be the first to publish something and have it go viral. And, I feel like this puts so much pressure on technologists that are trying to do the right thing. So when they, if or when a technologist like you or me, we need to dive in and learn something new, really, how deep do we need to go? I see this really having an impact on people's mental health as well. Like, how deep do you go? Do you, what adjacent places are most important to networking or cloud networking, whatever it is that you're doing? And like, you have that constant pressure, and it can cause anxiety. And I know, like, this messes with me for as long as I can remember, but does it ever impact you in that way? And how do you deal with it?
Yeah, it can definitely like lead to burnout pretty much. I think there was a point in my career where, especially if you work in a place that has all the things and a very small team, so everyone has to know a thing, or know pieces of all the things, you can easily just get burned out. And that's kind of what delayed my CCIE by 30 journey. If you ask people on Twitter, you're never gonna get it, but it did kind of delay it because I was bouncing around from all these different topics, and I felt like there was additional pressure because there's the industry pressure of being this, you've somehow woken up one day and you're this influencer, if you will. So people are asking you about all this new technology. So you feel the pressure to know something, to answer the questions. And then from a workplace standpoint, we have all this technology and it's like there's just too much to pick from. So I bounce around from voice to, I consider networking the foundation regardless, but voice, then back to traditional route switch, then data center. And I really had to, again, just take a step back and look at everything. Like, I can't learn everything. That's just not possible. Not to the depth that, like, people expect you to know. So I really just had to, hone in on, all right, what is the core thing? And then what are like the little, if you think of a mind map, the little offshoots of this core thing. And then really gauging for yourself, how much of this do I really need to know? And another thing that helps with that is to just talk to other people in your space who are, a little bit more experienced. Maybe they've been an expert, this has been their specialization forever. Like, how much Linux do I really need to know? And then just like gauging that before you just jump off the deep end and get all of these, certifications, and um, you're, you're exhausting yourself trying to chase after this thing. With AI in particular, I think I have like AI enthusiast in my bio because that's what I consider myself. I want to know enough about AI to see how I can leverage it in my job in content creation in a way that makes sense. I just don't see myself going back to school to, get a degree. One, I hate math, so that's out. But
Math
I
and
want to,
data.
yeah. I want to know enough about it to see. Same with data analytics. That's a great thing. That was a really big thing that I saw just like a lot of people learning. And in networking and security, you work with a lot of data. So I'm pretty much like, let me just watch some fundamental classes and see, how can I better handle the data I have to handle. And I think that comes with like just time and experience. You kind of get to a place where the new technology comes out, and if it's something that interests you, it's like, how can I integrate this into my job or maybe with content creation in a way that makes sense? I don't need to be an expert. I don't need to be, the thought leader in AI and networking. I don't need to do any of that. What tools are available? How can they make my life easier? And, and then I can create content from that. Like, hey, I'm blanking on his name, but there's a gentleman at Cisco who's doing a lot of like Chat GPT style stuff with Cisco
John
documentation.
Capobianco.
Yes. How can I
Yeah.
take this thing that John created and here's what I did, to configure something in ACI? Like, that's a piece of content. I don't need to be the person that created the GPT to do configurations in ACI. I don't need to do that.
I had him on the podcast, and for some reason, I don't know why,
Mm-hmm.
my mom found, like, I didn't even tell my mom I started a podcast, and she
Mm-hmm.
listened to that. That was the episode that was newest, and she was like so confused, and she was almost like concerned because she, like, for the longest time, she just thinks I work on computers or something. And she was like, what in the heck are you all talking about? What have you gotten yourself into? Like, Mom, it's not a big deal. Just chill.
It's a part of
Yeah,
computers.
exactly. It was a complete nerd episode, like 100%, like nerd. John's
Mm-hmm.
great though. But you said a lot there that's really like, so I have a lot of questions, like, for advice I would say that I get these days, like when I really drill down, like as I'm trying to help someone, I feel like a lot of times it revolves around wanting to take shortcuts if you really look at the skinny of it.
Mm-hmm.
And, I myself was one of these folks many years back. Like when I was younger, I'm not completely established in my career. And, well, you want to get somewhere. You want to get a
Right.
more fulfilling job. You want a higher salary. You want a better title. And you want to do it quick. So as I'm
Mm-hmm.
like more established now, I can look back on my experience and realize, okay, there really was not any shortcuts,
Right.
and when there was it, if I did try to take a shortcut, the value was very short lived. It wasn't really valuable in the playing the long game. What do you think about this taking shortcuts? Is there any magic shortcut that exists, or do you have to put in the work?
There is no magic shortcut. um, I think that, so when you're, like you said, when you're first starting out, you're trying to get, a higher salary, a better title. You're trying to learn all the things. I have found that when you do take shortcuts, they just delay you getting, like, had you just done the thing all the way through, you probably would have gotten there sooner than if you did a shortcut or diverted. Um, with that said, I think there are, you really have to even, and again, this comes with experience and really why I push people to find a mentor. Even if that's just like somebody online, Like ask the general, the Twitter community, or if you're in any other tech communities about these things. Anywhere you have access to more experienced people, to just really figure out, like, does it make sense for me to, go 10 feet deep into this topic, or can I just, do this thing, see a course, something like that, and then just, move on. A lot of times what I see is we put a heavy emphasis on certifications and just having the cert, that people either just memorize the information and go and pass, or they resort to other methods like dumps or something to pass. And then they get out there, or they get in these jobs and they realize, I didn't absorb anything I learned. I didn't learn anything. I just memorized, what does the switch do? What does the router do? So, and I think people realize, once they're in that situation, they either have to work harder to, maybe they're in a job that's like, oh, well, you said you had the CCNA, so we expect you to do all these things. If they're not fortunate enough to get in an environment that focuses on, hey, you don't have to know all the things. Let's just take it one step at a time. So they end up spending more time to go back to then study or learn all the things that they should have been doing while they were preparing for the certification itself. So there are no shortcuts. Take your time. It's 100%. A marathon, not a sprint.
Exactly. You said that so perfectly. It reminds me, actually, so like, it's funny, and get engaged with community stuff. If you have local community things. So I did this event down in Atlanta. It was down. Yeah, I think it was Atlanta. It was like one of these USNUA events. So like I presented about like data center networking or something. And it was pretty crowded. It was like the inaugural one. And most of the folks there were like just network engineers that have been doing it for a long time. And there was this young gentleman that had just graduated college in the middle of everybody, never had a networking job, and he was studying for a CCNA. And he was the most excited person I've ever seen anywhere in my life. He was so thrilled to be around other real network engineers. And like when I got done presenting and like we were sort of doing the social stuff, it was basically him in the middle of this gigantic circle of network engineers. And they're just giving him advice. He's bouncing. I mean, it was just like a rotating, just turnstile of questions. And he was so happy, so excited. And he was like, he kept saying like, this is the best thing that's ever happened. I have so much that I can take home, so much good advice. And, it was direct from people in person that have been there. And like, that made me feel, I was just so happy for him. Like, and you want that just kind of back to the trade schools. Like I see so many folks that come through the college pipeline and they're just focused on certs or something. And they don't know they don't know what to do. Like they don't know how to get a job. They don't have anything structured. And I feel like I want people to have like the good experience that I had through trade schools or through, seeing, some of these newer folks at these events. They get a lot of value from them early in their career, and changing, like, your attitude is so important. Having a positive attitude and having a direction. If you can maintain that positive attitude, even though, hey, we all got peaks and valleys at the end of the day, but maintain that positive attitude and you're going to go places.
Yeah. Be coachable. I see just
100%.
like a lot of people, you will get so much further just being, like you said, having a positive attitude than these people who, they sort of have like a arrogance and a condescending way. Like, I know everything. I'm an expert. Don't talk to me. Like, don't be one of those people.
Exactly. It's like back when I first was getting my chops in networking, there was a person that I worked for that was an absolute beast. He was just mean, but he knew everything. Like, he was so good, and he was good at explaining things, but he just did it in a way that like had you sweating. You're like, it was not a nice guy, but he was super valuable. And I learned so much from him in the beginning because he would actually take time and show me things and talk to me. And, he just might've been an unpleasant person. I don't know. But yeah, you gotta remember too, like, if you have an experience with someone that's maybe not so nice, or you gives you a really bad feeling and you feel bad about it and stuff, you just got to bounce back and move on to the next thing. It's like, Jay-Z, on to the next one, on to the next one, on to the next one, on to the next thing. You can't let some individual experience define you and let it set you back. So this has been it's been really fun to talk to you. These have been really good.
Thank you.
Really good answers. I learned a lot from you on this episode. If you want to, do you have anything to say to the audience? And where can I think everybody probably knows who you are, but where can people find you anyway?
So I'm on all social media platforms at CCIE by 30. And the big thing I want to plug is my podcast, Thrive in Tech. So please subscribe. It is on Spotify, Apple Music, and Amazon. It will be on YouTube soon. And yeah, I would love for people to subscribe to that and please tweet about it. Like talk about it. That helps.
Awesome. Yeah, and I honestly recommend this podcast. I went in to do some research again, and I just ended up listening to all of it pretty much. It was really awesome. So yeah, I'll put all those links in the show notes for your socials and the podcast as well.
Awesome.
All right. Thanks again, and have yourself a great weekend.
Thanks for having me.